everybody? Ty here. Hope everybody's doing well. Sorry, guys, that it's been so long since the last stream. I've been a little bit under the weather and struggling with a little bit of stuff here and there. So, apologies again. But we're back, and the good news is, for the most part, the worst of the cold weather seems to be about over. We're still going to have some nippy mornings and a couple chillier days here and there. But for the most part, we're not dealing with what was considered as the extreme cold that we were dealing with earlier this week. And winter weather's kind of slowing down on multiple fronts here, at least in the short term. So we get towards the long term, there's going to be more to talk about here. But outside of the Great Lakes, which are still kind of in play at least into the early part of this upcoming weekend, we don't have a whole lot in the way of winter weather to talk about in the short term. There's going to be some increasing activity actually out towards the southwest, and even chances of rain, however, as we go over towards the southwest, especially over towards LA, where it's been very much needed. However, this does end up being a bit of a double-edged sword for them, though, whereas we may end up seeing the possibility of mudslides, and considering the fact that we've had a bunch of wildfires there, be pretty damaging towards that region, of course. Unfortunately, the one thing that we always talk about when it comes to rain is we don't want it all at once, and unfortunately it does look like this might end up being the case. That being said, though, if we keep things moving, eventually it looks like precipitation chances as a whole begin to drop off. Thing is, of course, as I mentioned in previous videos and even during the live stream itself, this big pattern shift is going to be basically what you would call a negative PNA. Whereas before we were in a positive PNA. Basically, the two, of course, being inverses. A positive PNA is where the cold air is more towards the eastern half of the state and the warm air is off towards the west. So a negative PNA obviously is the opposite. Cool out towards the west, warm out towards the east. Another thing that I've made mention of quite a bit in these last few videos as well is with this big pattern shift, I am gaining increasing concern in regards to severe weather, and Storm Prediction Center seems to be agreeing with that as well. As we get towards days 5, 6, and 7, we now have predictability to low tags. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're guaranteed to have severe weather or anything, or that there's high confidence in it, but the potential actually seems like it's going to be there now. Still, there's a lot to be questioned with this, so again, we're just going to have to wait and see how things go. But we will be talking more about severe weather parameters over the course of the next couple of days. Now, not to disregard or completely just brush winter weather off to the side, we're still going to see some possibilities here and there. We're going to be going over that as well. If you look at the jet stream here, and of course, as we're doing our model comparison here, GFS or okay, I don't know why this is moving. There we go. Hitting the wrong key. But as we continue to move forward here, you can see that that troughing is going to work its way just ever so slightly off to the east here. And any cold air that still manages to make its way just east of the Rockies here, it's going to rush into this system by the time we get towards the beginning of February. And as a result, the chances of winter weather are going to go up more so towards the Midwest and maybe parts of the northern U.S. over here. A lot of the storm track over this last month has really been off towards the south here. Both models are in pretty good agreement with this as well. If we go all the way into the next week, that's when we really start to see this low pressure begin to deepen here. The little bit of variance between the models here has a lot to do more with how this low deepens here. It seems like we have a slightly more southern track with this as we get towards the 165 to 180 hour time frame. So again, over towards next week. Progression's different. Also, Euro looks like it has a slightly deeper or stronger low pressure with this. So deeper to low, usually we're able to get a little bit more cold air to wrap in behind it. But notice this feature right here that I'm looking at on the Euro and also with the GFS. Even though the two are kind of progressing a bit differently, there is a point in time where we see this little bit of a tilt here. This is a negative tilt. Notice how it's kind of pointing to the southeast a little bit. If we watch the progression over and over again, see how it's kind of pointed off this way. This will allow more warm air to seep into the southeast here and also Gulf of Mexico moisture. Thus, with this, I'm thinking that the chances of severe weather do indeed go up with this. Now, of course, there's other big factors here, but the more and more I've been looking at models, the more signals that I've been seeing that kind of indicate that the potential for severe weather is going to exist to start out in the month of February. Now, again, it's not guaranteed. There's a lot of other factors that go into it, but it seems like everything is slowly but surely coming together here. Timing, of course, is still a factor, and that's nearly impossible to kind of hammer down at this range here. We're looking just about at or a little bit over a week out here, so can't have a whole lot of confidence in that as of right now. It'd be kind of foolhardy to just say that's going to happen on a particular day at this very moment. But as we continue to move forward here, you see more and more in the way of troughing going forward here, more ridging coming into play here. And whenever these low pressure systems that we're seeing, or troughing instances like this one that we're looking at, as we go further and further along, come into play here, this is going to increase severe weather chances for whoever is on the upslope of this trough right here. So looks like Texas is going to be a point of interest in that. Imagine the parallel from going all the way from one extreme, which was winter weather, at times even near blizzard conditions, to severe weather. Pretty surreal, but that looks like it might be the case here. And as we continue to go forward, it doesn't matter which model we really look at, it does look like we have a pretty active storm track as we go through the month of February here. So a lot that we're going to be keeping an eye on as we go forward. So as we move forward here, you're also going to see a very good reflection of how busy it's going to be through the temperature map here. Oops, didn't want to move this one. I want to keep this here so you can see everything. But as we look at the GFS in particular, watch what happens as we get into next week in particular. You can already see the big time warming trend beginning to occur. Florida's already starting to recover and kind of feel like Florida should again. By the time we get into Monday, we're already getting into the mid 70s by the early afternoon for these regions here. Gulf Coast is getting into the 60s. This is a little bit more towards what we would expect for this time of year. But we're also going to get unseasonably warm as we go further along here. Look at the warm sector that's beginning to build here. We're also going to have some, like at times, we're also going to have some Gulf of Mexico moisture mixing in with this. So again, where we have that collision of warm and cold air is going to be a point of interest. So expect to see a little bit in the way of activity over here, because it looks like a lot of that flow is heading towards Texas. If you look towards the Gulf, you see this little area of pink. Look at the direction in which that was moving previously here. You can see it pretty clear. And then as we go forward, you can see it continuing to move and shift off to the east here. So that's going to be probably one of the first systems that we're going to be keeping an eye on in regards to potential severe weather for 2025 here. And then, of course, you can see the same exact thing going on with the Euro here. Both of these models are the latest that we have available here, so I have decent confidence in this. Again, timing, of course, is going to be a question, but nonetheless here, I'm seeing I guess you could call it a signal at this point in regards to severe weather potential. Again, how this ultimately turns out, there's a ton of other factors that would take hours to get into. And right now, as far as looking at those models, if we were to go into those said factors, they could still change at the drop of a dime. As we go further along here, not to say that we're exempt from the cold air as we get further along into February here, because you still see a nice little surge of cold air coming in as we get towards the mid-month. A little suspicious of the late month, but we'll have to see how things go there. But in any case, though, from what I'm seeing here, it does look like we're going to have at least maybe 2, potentially 3 opportunities at maybe severe weather as of right now. One signal that I'm confident in, 2 others that I'm keeping a close eye on just based off of what I've seen so far here. Now, by the time we get towards Monday, we'll make an update or a follow-up video behind this to really get into some of those other factors here, at least within that day 5 stretch and beyond here, because as we mentioned before, the first 4 days we still aren't expecting much in the way of severe weather or even thunderstorm activity. But this look right here that we're seeing on the Euro to go along with it is definitely a look that kind of intrigues me a bit more. This looks like a really strong frontal boundary that comes into play as we get towards the 9th. So again, definitely a lot to keep track of here as we get into this upcoming month, especially in the medium range and beyond here. So map kind of looks interesting here. Like I said, there's still going to be some winter weather that we're keeping an eye on, especially towards the middle part of the model run. So looking at the GFS here again, here's that chance of rain, mainly going to be cold rain over the course of the weekend, nothing to really be concerned with. Then this little clipper system is going to bring some lake effect snow over towards the northeast, but it's beyond this point where things kind of get interesting here. Now, there has been some talk that over towards the Texas Panhandle could be a bullseye here for some significant winter weather once again as we get towards the very end of the month. Now, models are kind of painting a different story for these. Each one has a unique look to it. At first, we were looking at the GFS about a day or two ago, looking at the potential of a blizzard even over here. That sense has changed a little bit, so never count your chickens before they hatch, as I always say. But in any case, though, it looks like a lot of warm air comes into play and keeps this winter storm relatively, I wouldn't say weak, but it's not quite as impressive as what we've seen lately, of course. Go ahead and take a look at the Euro here. Euro's really not showing much of anything either at this point. We've kind of downtrended with this just a bit. A lot of that warm air seems to be interfering with this potential wintry system. And for the most part, that cold air remaining limited is going to keep this mostly as cold rain at this point. So over the course of the next week, outside those little clipper systems that make their way into the northeast and the Ohio Valley, I wouldn't expect much in the way of snow. It's really going further beyond where we start to pay attention a little bit towards winter weather. Even then, it mainly looks like it's going to be more of the thing for the northern states here, maybe towards Minnesota, parts of Wisconsin here, where we may have the potential for yet another ice storm as well over towards Iowa. So we're going to be keeping an extra close eye on that, of course. And also GFS is in pretty good agreement here. But one thing I want to make mention of, again, I said it before, it's the timing that I'm also uncertain about. It looks like we're about maybe 18 hours in difference here. Not a full day quite, but not quite a full day, but as you can see here, the ice storm actually looks a little bit more potent on the GFS here. But also the snowfall seems to be a little bit heavier the further off to the east it goes, especially north of the border, whereas this track seems to be a little bit more southern and also a much stronger low pressure that's hanging around the Rockies to go with this. So just some observations that I'm making here, but does look like we may need to be keeping an eye on parts of Iowa, parts of Nebraska here for potential of some ice, and then also towards Minnesota and Wisconsin for some heavier snow possibly. Totals, of course, at this range, really not a point in getting into those right now because nothing's really guaranteed at this point. These runs could completely disappear by the time we get within the next 2 or 3 days. Could even disappear by the next run, which will be a little bit later this evening. So watch this head out and look at this big line of thunderstorms that's popped up here. Given the warm sector that we're going to have available here, I think towards the southern flank might be the point of interest where we could see the potential for maybe some severe weather. Again, at this range, kind of hard to nail down those details, but in any case, as we continue to go forward here, look at the amount of activity that we get over towards the deep south before all is said and done here with this model run here. In particular, this look on the Euro, which I mentioned before, is one that kind of intrigues me the most, especially seeing this really strong frontal boundary. Storms being further out ahead of it, depending on wind shear and other factors, this could be a pretty notable day if this were to indeed manifest. At this range, though, 360 hours, I'm not really willing to latch on to that right now. But seeing a relatively similar look on the GFS here does kind of capture my interest a bit as well. So, again, as I mentioned before, a lot to keep track of. It's going to be an interesting time in regards to how February ends up panning out. Again, kind of mentioned that this month could be a bit of a wild card. We'll see how things pan out from this point. But thank you guys for your time. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, it's been Metal Weatherman signing off.